All right, so we're almost at the top of the hour. Got a few more minutes. We'll see if any others join us. I'll just start introducing myself so we have more time for the webinar. My name is Lacey Brown. I'm a gerontologist with South Dakota State University Extension. I'm located in Rapid City, South Dakota. Just a few housekeeping things. There is a chat box at the bottom of your screen. Please type your questions there, and we will address all of your questions at the end of the webinar. So we're just going to wait a little bit longer. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to my colleague, Jane Strumman, who will introduce our speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. It's my pleasure to share some information about our presenter today. Susan, I should first say I'm Jane Strumman, and I am the gerontology specialist here at North Dakota State University, housed here at the Fargo campus. Susan Ray Deggs is a professor and an interior program coordinator at North Dakota State University. She holds a PhD from the University of Missouri, and she has successfully passed the National Council for Interior Design qualification, and she's a certified interior designer in Minnesota. She's currently the president of the Interior Design Educators Council and a fellow of the American Society of Interior Designers. Her research interests focus on design, pedagogy, assessment, and gerontology. She is in her 28th year in the Department of Apparel, Merchandising, Interior Design, and Hospitality Management. And we are so delighted that she is going to be sharing her wealth of knowledge and expertise with us today. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you for letting me talk to you all. I'm very excited. I will actually tell you all, this is my first webinar in my many years of doing presentations, so bear with me if I sort of jump between my screens and look like my eyes are going wonky. I debated whether or not to turn my picture on so you could actually see me. So if I get really scared, I may just turn myself off. I returned from warmer climates, so I don't know where you all are stationed at. I was just actually in Tulsa, and there's jonquils in bloom, so it's very sad that some of us are still in our cold weather that we currently have. So welcome, and thanks for taking time to learn about ways that individuals can stay in their homes longer through home modification. I'm hoping that we will both leave this presentation finding ways to enhance people's lives, allowing them to stay in their homes longer as they get older, as long as they're able and as they age. Many have concerns about safety, getting around, and about daily activities. So this webinar will highlight factors that will help older adults obtain their goal in remaining in their homes longer. Some of the objectives: describing aging in place, which actually I just did with the first slide. Identifying factors that can help or hinder older adults in obtaining that goal, summarizing some deficiencies that we have in our current housing stock in both South Dakota and North Dakota. I'm going to highlight a little bit about universal design and describe how it could support successful aging in place, and go over some resources that could help move people forward in making modifications to existing homes to support successful aging in place. On the slide in front of you right now, you can see the 7 principles of universal design. I'm not going to dive into them very deeply just because we could actually spend a whole presentation on that. But I want to just point out that universal design has, the concept of that was brought about by Ron Mace. Some of you may be familiar with that individual. It was in the 80s. He was a fellow in the American Institute of Architects. And this was a concept that was focused on creating products, buildings, environments that could support virtually everyone, regardless of their level of ability or disability. And so when we look at diversity, you know, can we create products and materials? Can they be flexible? Can they be intuitive? Are they easily to perceive, create minimal hazard, they're low effort? And can we create appropriate spaces? So These are just concepts that are underlying as myself as a designer when I'm working with people in their environments that I think about. I don't sort of list them out when I'm going through a project. They're in the back of my mind as I'm creating design solutions. And so as we go through the different portions of this design project and presentation, they will come up in our discussion. This picture, just to give you an idea, when I'm training and working with students, they actually go through simulation training, and these are actually some of our simulation suits that we use. When we look at our current stock and where we're at in our state of the North Dakota and South Dakota, nearly half the adults 85 and plus report serious difficulty in walking, climbing stairs. 45% of those that are 85 and older have difficulty doing errands alone, such as going to the doctor or even going shopping. Most homes have missed one or more basic accessibility feature. They don't often have a bathroom or a bedroom on the first floor, which will be great as you become disabled. It's very difficult to climb stairs. And we often have difficulty getting through our hallways. Our older homes may have narrow doorways, they may have narrow hallways. So if you have an assistive device, walkers, wheelchairs, it's difficult to move through those spaces in our home just to do routine tasks. Some of the common barriers that we have in our homes, have in our environments as we age: services. We don't have easy access to those. We risk isolation. When you're living alone, especially impacted by our rural neighborhoods. Transportation. We lots of times lose the ability to drive, so we have to rely on others to take us places, and that again makes us feel like we're separated from others. The other is home design. As I already mentioned, we have architectural features in the home that create barriers. Community design, depending on where you're living, the walkability of that community to get around on sidewalks. Even our weather sometimes creates a great disadvantage. Service availability. What is available in your community or county? We are going to highlight some of the services are there. We'll have some handouts that will be a follow-up that what's available in your state or county that you can access. And then pre-planning. Families often don't sort of think in the future, what can we do in this interior that as we age in place that can support that? I just left my mother, she's 92, and we were having a discussion about how we can create this stepped entry into her space so that she won't tumble and fall again. She just fell. And so we were discussing a transitional step from the back of her house into her house. And so I had her walk it out. We measured it out and was creating pre-planning so we can add another step into her house so she will not fall again. So we were involved in a study because we know there's some existing barriers and benefits, but what can we do to change this? So we conducted a study, Jane and Lacey and I, to explore existing gaps in consumer knowledge, motivation, and barriers to implement accessible and universal housing design. With this study, it focused on our 2 states, and we really wanted to know, what did consumers know, what was their motivation, and what were some of the barriers they had in implementing design strategies to facilitate successful aging place among adults of all ages. In just a second, let me take a drink. I get going really fast when I talk. My students tell me to slow down, so I'll slow down. I'm really not originally from here, but I still talk fast. We used a mixed method approach to collect data. This was collected in January to March of 2018. And the responses were used to evaluate participant knowledge and motivation. Why did they or did they not implement accessible and universal design housing options? Our sample included a huge, actually fairly good response rate. We had 691 people. As you can see, the larger percentage of our respondents were females. A larger percentage had attended college, though we did have a good percentage that had also had been to trade school, had some college professional graduate degree. The median age, as you can see, is 48. 18% of the individuals self-identified as having some type of disability or someone in their household had a disability. A good percentage of the individuals either had a mortgage on their home, owned their home with a mortgage, or were going through a loan process. Interestingly enough, our respondents were more focused in the urban area. You can see the division of respondents rates. 35 were from North Dakota, South Dakota was 62%. And the block up in the corner, that's the sort of teal color, is showing how many people identified the term as being familiar with universal design. So it was about 26, about a fourth of the population understood what the term universal design was. So what did we find through this process? The key findings focused on financial implications, universal design, availability of housing, affordability, and verbiage. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those before we get into specific design applications. Most people seem to be aware that they were not making investments in aging in place ready homes. They knew that they were delaying and that they really should perhaps make investments in those, but they were not. And I often think that people, and when I work as a designer with people, they're like, oh, I really should have thought about this, but I didn't plan for this. And so today we're going to look at examples of how you can look at design solutions and even sometimes do things in phases to prepare for this. Universal design, what does it mean? Lots of times, people are saying that, we don't really need this. This is something that actually can be built into people's homes. It's easily to create these concepts and actually integrate them into our industry. For a person who's actually been in the design industry for a long time, this is something that could easily be done, but people don't want to embrace it actually in the industry. Availability. We are not doing very good in our housing stock right now to support aging in place. So we need to think of measures in education and in training, out in with real estate, with home builders to better do a job to embrace the people so they can successfully age in place. Affordability in housing for older adults is not understood very well. And then the other piece, which I think is probably one of the biggest concerns is, and I think we will share this in a document that you all can have access to, is verbiage. We all use so many different terms. And even in my industry, as a designer in education, we have to be careful what kinds of jargon and terms we use to describe universal design, aging in place. All these terms get really tangled up, and it's just like somebody will look at you and say, what does this really mean? And so being clear on what you're describing when you're talking to a person. When I talk to my mother, I say, you are successfully aging in place, and she sort of rolls her eyes back in her head and says, could you please tell me what I'm doing in my life? But I mean, we need to use terms that people understand. So recommendations, establishing work groups, developing accreditation or rating systems that will encourage people in the real estate industry or in the housing industry to create housing options that people will say, oh, this house is rated and certified. And I'm going to go through some examples in just a second. Strategies to manage the existing housing stock and implement user-friendly strategies and standards. So let's take a look at these. So work groups, what we would see happening with this particular option is that we would create businesses or organizations that would look at funding models that would consider identifying barriers and then working with these work groups to get information out to the community that would embrace aging in place standards and universal design and visitability standards for the community. Accreditation or certification processes. This has actually been successful in some areas of the United States. It would be awesome if this could be embraced in our communities in North Dakota and South Dakota. Basically what they do is they go in, a house is built, and then they go in and evaluate the house on different levels. So you have a level 1, it's a visitable house. I can go in and I have a wheelchair or basically a 0-step entry. I can go with my wheelchair. I can go into the bathroom and go and use the facility. The door handles are all lever style handles. The faucets are all lever style. So that's considered level 1 visitable. It's level 2 fully accessible if it has an accessible bedroom and kitchen, parking area, entrance, all on the first level. If it's an enhanced accessibility, it means that it's been designed possibly with lift systems and other kinds of accessible features that can help a person that has specific unique physical challenges. So the house then has those ratings, and then it's marketed, it's given a certificate for the seller or a listing agent. Then people, when they're out on the market, know that that house has that particular certificate. So those kinds of things do exist. This particular example that you're seeing on the screen is in Oregon, or Oregon, depending on who you hear pronounce it. But again, if this house tour is actually, you can go through this entire house. It's on the AARP website, and I'll double check to make sure that this is hyperlinked. You all will have access to these slides after the presentation is completed. So a great example of what a community has done to embrace and accommodate visitability and universal design standards. Another example is when you have builders and developers that at minimum include visibility features. And we're going to go through examples of those in the subsequent slides. But looking at non-for-profit agencies that work with the local housing agencies to implement these features. Can you for sure make sure a person can get into that house, go into the non-step entrance, there's no steps up to it, you can get to a bathroom on that floor, the doorways are wide, and I think that that is critical if we're going to move this forward. And there's been some legislative activity through government agencies where we've had one particular individual that tried to put this forward actually at the as a U.S. representative in Inclusive Housing Act in 2003. And this is a diagram that shows you the stepless entrance, bathroom access, and accessible circulation. It's just sitting there. There are some states that are adopting this, that if you're going to get tax credits, waivers for permits, that this can be done in some states. But again, it would be great if it was something that was nationwide. Again, it would allow priority for some states to, from some cities to permit things. This one has a stepless entrance on a side ramp at the back of the house. It possibly has a stepless entrance at the front. It's not been indicated with the arrow, the diagram I pulled off for an example, but I would like to see every entrance be stepless. You don't want it just at the back. Again, provides that full circulation around the interior and lets people in the house and have access. This particular illustration shows the project that Lisa, Jane, and I worked on, that you can actually take your phone and look at the QR code, and you can open the entire book and you can actually download it. That talks about the study and has additional information that goes in more detail on the study. So you all can access that. You can, and this one's just linked onto the NDSU website, but you can also get to it at the South Dakota site. So let's take a look at some more details about visitability, changes you can make to your home to make it safer and easier for people to be independent. The items that are listed on the left side are proposed ideas that if we could create a visitability code, these would be the ideal ones that we would like to really have in place. Zero step entrance, which I have already mentioned. The bathroom and bedroom on the same level as the zero step entrance. Planning ahead of time, putting a bathroom wall has reinforcement, whether you do it with stud wall construction or plywood. Having wide hallways, 42 inches would be ideal. Electrical wall outlets, excuse me, getting them up higher on the wall. And then wall switches and fans, making sure they're higher above the finished floor, and then making sure that all interior doors, walls, I can't even talk anymore, doors are 32 inches wide, excuse me. I was telling my team before I started, I apologize, I got in really late last night, so I'll try to keep my words from getting mangled. So let's take a look at entrances. We want the entrance spaces to have a zero step entrance. These are really great examples. People think, well, they're going to look ugly. They do not have to be ugly if you plan them. These two examples show you how you can use pavers and concrete. The one on the right has you still having a regular stair step along with the ones showing you left, how you can do a gradual incline with a ramping. They can be considered a new construction, or you can modify. The one to the right is a modification. So again, very simple additions, very thoughtful in their approach. You could, on the one on the left, add additional railings for the safety for someone. So if you're considered, if you had balance issues in that and you want to provide the railings, those could be added as well. The one that people more traditionally see are the modifications with this one, with the ramp up the side of the house. Again, it's a very sturdy approach. They're doing modifications on this house, as you can see, with windows and such, but redesigned to accommodate a ramp approach. You can get someone easily up to their front door and get them on into the rest of their house. The next example is, you know, people will have lots of times around here have decks. This house actually has many access points. This is actually North Dakota. It was a home that had a lot of interesting modifications. It actually had a lift system from the garage. The gentleman had been a hunter, and he still actually did some of that even after he became disabled. And so he had a lift system that took him out of his garage into his van. And so there was a lot of very thoughtful modifications that this house provided great access to the outdoors. Another consideration, as we already mentioned, is an accessible bathroom at the entry level. It can be a half bath, which is a guest bathroom, which includes only a toilet or a sink, but it creates a really inviting interior that everyone can enjoy. You'll notice that there is a full turnaround if someone is in a assistive device, and it's just showing you some of the dimensions that would be allowed and necessary to accommodate that. And then the second one, this is more of a full bathroom layout where you're seeing, this is a remodel. And if you all will look over at the right-hand side in the small picture, there's a before picture to the left. And I have included the link where this particular company does a lot of remodels for accessibility. And it shows you the different examples of how this has a folding door for the shower. There's a fold down seat. There is an adjustable shower head, and how the grab bars have been modified around the toilet where it's been put at an angle to accommodate the full circulation in this bathroom. There are different options that you can look at for bathrooms when you have limited space. You can use an offset door hinge if the hallway will allow you to do this. If you do not have enough space, you can swing the door out. An offset door hinge can allow you 2 additional inches of space where the door will swing inward. The other options to think about for greater accessibility in the bathroom are using the lever faucets, which I've already mentioned. The one on the top right, of course, is a single lever, and the double handles for both the cold and the hot water if you cannot use a single lever. And I will point out this diagram in the very center. You can't use the 5x8 bathroom in the current configuration, but I will show you one where you can convert something like that and make it into a complete wet space when it's a roll-in shower in just a moment. Already pointing out the use of the faucets. I always sometimes like to show, and this is a messy picture because this is an actual space that's in use, but sinks are important in how you install those for people to use. It's open below. The only thing that is a challenge in this sink is you could have doors that would cover this so you don't see the drain area. You usually want to cover the piping or wrap the piping in the P-trap area with some kind of insulative material in case the person that is using that does not have feelings in their legs. They've lost that ability. So I did want to point that out. I forgot to put that on the slide, but you will notice that the sink comes out a little bit further depending on a person's height. This is really helpful. The other notation I'll point out is that it's great to have storage close by the sink area so a person doesn't have to carry their items very far. And then we have a walk-in or roll-in shower. The grab bars, again, are important, and an adjustable shower head. Again, that ease of accessibility makes it very helpful. This particular bathroom has a rolling door rather than a regular doorway to get into the space. This diagram is in here to show you the different ways in which walls can be configured. It would be great in the ideal world if we all just went ahead and put plywood backing on our walls to plan ahead, so that any bathroom could be reconfigured and have grab bars added if someone needed those for assistance. They are shown both with solid wood blocking as well as the plywood. And then I think it's helpful because when I work with my students, they're like, well, what does it really look behind that wall? So that's the reason the lower right-hand picture has been provided, so you can actually see where they go. Shower stalls generally have vertical grab bars, so that's the reason that they're placed at the wood has been placed at different places for blocking. I provided both a shower and a tub example because each person has different preferences, and depending on what you're working with, if you're doing a renovation, so you can see where those grab bars would be installed. As we look at other grab bar installations, we're beginning to see new designs that are more accommodating for some of our frail older adults that don't have the upper body strength. So the drop-down grab bars are sometimes a little bit more helpful. They're also helpful if you have a caregiver. So the diagram or the photograph to the left shows those being installed. The diagram in the middle is the more traditional grab bar installation, and then also showing you the turnaround space if you are using a wheelchair and how much space that you would need to have. It's also important to look at toilets. Toilets need to be tall enough for that user to be able to get up and sit down easily. If you're going to install a new toilet, make sure that the height works for the person that you're working with. There's elevated seats. Also, are you going to use a commode seat? And so again, working with that person to make sure that it will accommodate their needs. Sometimes you may want to involve an OT person for their assistance if you don't feel comfortable doing that. This example is a really good accessible bathroom. There's the before picture. That's a more traditional bathroom layout. You know, you've got your tub, your toilet, and sink. I don't know why we have spent our lives configuring bathrooms this way, because they don't really work well for a lot of us. We fall out of our tubs and hit our heads on the toilets, which I find very challenging to work with them. And they've reconfigured it. They put the sink in the corner. We still have the toilet, but they've allowed that turnaround space there. But what's nice about this one, this is a wet room. And you can actually see a photograph now of this room to the far left. Wet rooms are really awesome because everything, you have to get the right kind of tile installed for slip resistance. You can work with drain systems that will allow all the water, where it's talking about a collapsible rubber shower threshold, and work with drainage systems, but everything in the space can be wet. I've designed a couple of these just because at home I had a limited amount of space, and so I had to have a complete wet bathroom for a person in my house. And you have to work on venting, and you have to work on draining and make sure you use the right kind of tile. But if you are working with challenging spaces, a full wet room can work very well for some installations. But again, make sure that you're specifying the right kind of flooring and wall finishes. Sort of the last piece to look at when you're looking at visitability, because we're just going to sort of touch on, as I said, the bathrooms and the doorways and getting people in our houses. I could go into bedrooms and other kinds of spaces, but we don't have time for that kind of conversation today. But we're going to look at doorways right now. Is that you want to make sure we get people through your space and they're able to circulate easily. Of course, you need lever handles. You need to make sure you have your wider doorways that are at least 32 inches wide. Wider is better. And in new construction, 36 inches entry door is standard. Older homes typically don't have that, so if you're remodeling, try to increase those doorways. This is a more close-up view of the expandable offset door hinge that I talked about earlier. There's a little bit of a diagram on the top right-hand side that shows you how much it will give you as far as 2 inches more as it will swing out. They have both interior door expanded offset door hinges and exterior, so if you do specify those or select those, make sure you get the correct ones just because of the weight of the doors. You've got to make sure that hinge will support that. And then this is just showing you pocket doors can be used. Of course, when you're doing remodels, they're a little bit more of a challenge because you're going to have to rip into the entire door. This one was one that was planned between the master bedroom and a bathroom. And of course, notice the no-step threshold. The diagram on the left shows you how you've got to watch the thresholds the smooth transition is ultimately the best, but again, just about 1/4 of an inch is really good for someone with a wheelchair or a walker. You don't want any kind of lip to catch on something because it will be a tripping hazard for someone. The far picture to the right shows you the transition out to the deck that we actually were outside looking at on that ramp up to the deck. What's interesting about this picture is not only is it a 0-step threshold out to the deck, this family was very thoughtful because the individual was in a wheelchair. The sort of curio cabinet that you see, they raised the kick space up on that high enough to accommodate that individual's wheelchair, so they would never hit any of the bottom of the cabinetry and left it open. So some resources you can look at to help you move forward. A couple of definitions. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page as me before we look at some of these. DME, or durable medical equipment. On some of the resources that you will have available to help you move forward on your projects, it may only pay for durable medical equipment versus labor, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But as the name indicates, your durable medical equipment are those items that serve for a medical purpose, and it has to typically be ordered or prescribed by a medical provider. And these are things that you're going to use for a long period of time. So pressure mattress, hospital beds, mobility aids such as scooters, walkers, wheelchairs. And that can also include commodes. So those kinds of items are the things that as a design professional, I would be looking at working with a client. So those may be things that you may also be considering. Bath chairs are also considered. So those may be things that you're installing in a bathroom. So let's look at the next slide so you can understand why I wanted to bring this up. When you're looking at financial assistance, we've got sort of 4 big categories. We have low interest loans, home improvement grants. There may be free labor. There may be some, there's nonprofit organizations, charities that may work with you. The materials are not covered, but then there also may be equipment loans. So those are sort of our 4 categories that we'll look at for resources where you may be able to access assistance. We have a chart that breaks down some of the areas where you can access resources. I highlighted the column for seniors, just so it's specific to our discussion today. And then there's a column, you can see homeowners, renters, and landlords. You can see targeted for the disabled, targeted for the low income. And you can see the different resources that may be available in your community or in your area. And there's more than one slide, so this is not all that's available. So you can see some of them are through HUD, rural development, financial agencies through state housing, lender equity financing. Again, that may depend where you are in your, if you're a renter, landlord, or homeowner. There's also remodeler refinancing, federal housing loan insurance. There may be things through Medicare waivers, social services, assistive technology. So again, depending on where you're at. And then again, there may be some additional things through workers' comp, crime victims benefits. Again, some of that may be unique to your area and state and local taxes. So we wanted to bring this table forward. This will be also available in our handouts for you to hang on. They're also in the slides, but they actually will be in one sheet as opposed to being broken down, so that you have a chance to look at these in more detail. When we look at home modifications and the durable medical equipment, you all need to keep this in mind. Materials for modification, we have the durable medical equipment, so you have that. But then you also have labor. And so you may be able to, the person says an older adult may need a lift system, or they may need a commode. This may be covered, but the materials and other things to build that may not be covered. So you need to check and see what elements will be covered by certain elements of financial assistance, and other things may not be. And so labor to install, for example, the stair lift or a stair glide may not be covered. So you need to figure out which items are covered by certain elements of Medicaid, Medicare. You have to sort of review those things as you're going through the process. Another example, if you're going to widen a doorway to allow for wheelchair to access, or you have to have additional power outlets to accommodate electrical equipment. You're going to need expertise of contractors that may be required to assess the extent the home modifications are needed or to provide a bid for cost. You don't just, you need to find certain specialists to help you with that. The reason I've included certified aging in place specialists for this is that with that kind of conversation, it's like, where do you go to get those people? Well, in both North Dakota and South Dakota, we have certified aging in place specialists. Each of our states have 9. I don't know why we both have an equal number, but I do have the list of those now. And we'll give you the resource for you to access those individuals if you want to bring them on board to your projects. Some of them are builders, some of them are contractors, some of them are OT people, some of them are cabinetry specialists. So it just depends on where they are in your state, but they can provide guidance because they have a specialized knowledge in that area. Just to point out that with Medicare, they may provide assistance for some modification elements. You really need to check on what they will provide assistance for. Medicare Part B may pay for an occupational therapist to evaluate a home. It may provide assistance for the hardware associated with the modification, but not for the construction. So again, you need to work with your insurance people to guide you through the process. Medicare Advantage, available through private insurance companies, may offer the same advantages as original Medicare, but again, you need to make sure that you read the details. I don't claim to be a specialist on Medicare, not my job, but I want to point out that each of these resources are out there, but you need to check and see what pieces they'll pay for. Sometimes it's equipment, sometimes it's certain elements, but the labor often is not covered. And so you all need to check and see what it will be paying for. Most of the time, Medicare will cover the majority of the durable medical equipment. So it may pay for the grab bars, it may pay for the wheelchair, but unfortunately, it lots of times won't pay for the labor. But there are some other loans that may pay for the actual home modification, which is why we've got that one list put together, and we're putting a list together specific to your state or your region of people for you to reach out and contact. Because I don't think it's good use of our time for me to go through each of those for each of the regions, because it's very unique and different. The one thing that I will point out on this slide, Dakota at Home and the Aging and Disability Resource link, we will be giving you those links so that you can connect with the specific providers for your state. The other thing that is unique, if you have veterans that you are working with, they have grants and assistant programs that help aging veterans. That can be very helpful. They're very unique to specific things with their homes. They're SAH, SHA, TRA, and HISA. And I actually put these in a chart because I thought it would be easier to look at. So let me go to that slide. So special adapted housing grants, special housing adaptation grants. I did not come up with these names. They look about the same, but they're a little bit different in that it basically is money that will buy, build, or change your home if you're a veteran, and it depends on specific physical challenges that you may have. And what I encourage anyone that's working with a veteran, or if you are a veteran, that you can go to the VA and go through that process. The links on the webs on this particular PowerPoint are hot links, and they're also going to be on the handout. There's a temporary adaptation grant that can make changes actually to a family member's home if the veteran is living there. And it's designed to help meet their physical needs, depending on what physical challenges they might have. Another one is a home and improvement and structural alteration. And this is a grant that provides medically necessary improvement and structural alteration for that person's primary resident as a veteran. And what's nice about this one, they specifically list out what physical changes that grant will address. And as you can see them, it's like an entrance and exit to your home. The bathroom changes to the kitchen and bathroom entrance paths, and also plumbing and electrical systems. So This one's more specifically spelled out than some of the other ones. But again, you need to work with the VA and the application process that the Veterans Administration will work through with that particular veteran. This is an example that was posted on the VA website. This was actually really nice because it said this was one that was through the Home Improvement and Structural Alteration Grant. This was a bathroom before, and this is a bathroom after, that they had done a nice structural improvement for that particular individual for them to live independently in their home. So I know we've covered a lot of information in this brief period of time. I've described aging in place because we want older adults to be able to stay in their homes longer. We've gone over the concept of universal design that supports the idea that building products and environments should be accessible to all people regardless of their age and disability and other factors. We've highlighted some of the gaps that we currently have in our state. I've touched on lots of different things that could enhance or limit older adults' ability to stay in their home, and highlighted some proposed visibility solutions and resources that are available to support successful aging in place. And I know I've gone through this really fast. I did it in 40 minutes. I didn't know if I could actually get through it quite that fast. And I think Lisi's been taking notes, and I suppose some people probably have some questions. So that's my picture of my mom with the two of us together. So if you guys have some questions, I will try to answer them.
So we didn't have any questions come through in the chat box yet. But Susan, I'm very grateful for your willingness to do this webinar today. The experience you bring and the fact that you have been on the ground working in people's homes to try to make them fit their needs better. It's just a unique perspective that Jane and myself don't necessarily have. So we are grateful for your experience and sharing your knowledge with us today. Not seeing any questions so far. So we can wait a few more minutes and see if any questions come through. And while people think, Jane, Susan, and myself, we really enjoyed working on this housing project together. And, one of our visions, our dreams is that home modifications for future generations become less needed, because we know right now so many folks live in homes that need modification for them to be able to remain in their home successfully. And unfortunately, most folks delay those modifications until they're needed. And if we would implement these modifications sooner, we could probably improve a lot of outcomes for all of us. So our vision is ambitious, but we hope that one day home modifications are just a thing in the past that we read about in history books. So we did have a comment. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the information, informing people about the great programs through the VA. That's some feedback we got already, Susan.
Okay.
And so we will email the slides out. We have a handout that we're going to send out, and we're going to work on cleaning it up, because as you saw on the slides, it's a lot of information. Our goal is to have that sent to you by next week. Later today, you will probably receive a link to the evaluation for this webinar. Please provide feedback. You can give us suggestions for other topics that you would like covered during future webinars. This is our last webinar of the spring. Our next one will be starting in the fall. So in that evaluation, you can give us ideas about what topics you would like to see covered. You can also provide your contact information so that if you want to be notified about our future webinars, we will send the information to you directly. Someone else wrote, I appreciate knowing that there are financial resources available for people to make home modifications. There are financial resources and there are strategies, and we'll send some of that information out later so that folks can take a closer look.
This is Jane, and I'd just like to also thank Susan for sharing her expertise around this particular topic. I hope that we've been able to stress the importance of planning, because if we wait until somebody absolutely needs some modifications in their home, sometimes it's too late. And people need to look at alternative housing. So to be able to plan for those modifications is important, whether it's looking at the finances that would be available, the construction, how you would do that, or the equipment that might be needed, I think has been a really good offering in today's webinar, and I hope that it's been helpful. So thanks again to Susan.
Well, and we did have a question, Susan.
Yes.
Have you done projects that include technology improvements as part of the aging in place upgrade? So in using technology solutions.
I think we're beginning to see more of that. And again, it depends on what level of technology that we're looking at. And it also depends on the level of comfort that that individual feels with technology.
So I'm wondering, so Susan, we have another one, and I was guessing that James was talking about probably like sensors and that kind of stuff. So the next question is there a way to use rugs in the home without creating a trip hazard?
Oh, I don't mean to groan on rugs. I would like rugs to all just leave the world. Rugs have continued to be a problem. If rugs, there really is no way. I've yet to find a safe way to install rugs, and a lot of people, like, if you have a very, very large area rug and it has no fringe, and there's an adhesive method, it's a tape, it's fairly, I'd have to get the brand name for it, that you can secure it, but it has to be secured all the way around, but it has to be right on the edge, but there's still that danger. If it's anchored with furniture and it's like it's an area rug and it's in a grouping, it will work. But still, it's like that whole thing of there's this difference of height that somebody can stumble on. And so that's always a big concern for me. And it depends on the frailty of the individual and their gait. Because I actually have a friend that did a study with carpets and rugs, and so I will always just say, if at all necessary, except maybe a bath mat in the bathroom so that they don't have a slippery floor in the bathroom, I always just say, please get them out of the house.
So we have a James writes, do communities ever approach this challenge as a group instead of one person at a time? And I'm just going to lead in and then you pick up, Susan.
Yeah.
That example in Oregon that you shared with the certification, that was kind of a community approach.
Yeah, there's a couple other ones which I didn't include that have been groups and organization of people that have sort of taken, I'm sure it was a grassroots effort, but they're groups that have taken leads on these and have been successful in getting them implemented in their communities. And it would have to take a little bit of exploration probably to figure out where that first person started with those. But if we can get, communities, small communities started and have, I think if we get real estate people to buy in and basically local architectural groups and home builders associations to buy in, then I think we could go forward with it.
And I will add a little bit more, James. I think one of our hopes, Susan, Jane, and myself, is that we do see more community groups step up and try to address this problem. How home design can really be a deal breaker for our success as we get older. And so many of the homes have steps to get in, have narrow doorways. They have the tiny bathroom that it's almost impossible for most people to stay in their home. In addition to that, I've also heard circumstances where home care providers would not provide services because the bathroom was too small and potentially dangerous to the care provider. So yeah, we would like to see that. Anything else, Jane or Susan, on that one?
I think in my ideal world of my rose-tinted glasses, I would like to, create a model home that people could see all these features that would actually be where people could actually walk in and see, hey, this is what it's supposed to be, and that they could see that it's not. I think in people's minds they still visualize features in homes like this as being somewhat unattractive and institutional, and yet there's tons of models out there that are beautiful homes. And I think if we could finally get certain population groups to understand that they're fine and they're easy to build and they're no more expensive, because they aren't any more expensive. If we could get that wave to go, we'd be successful.
Yeah, we're all trying. So James also asked, excellent responses, thank you. Do you know a prefab company that builds aging in place homes? Susan?
Off the top of my head, no.
The only thing that I know of here in South Dakota is that we have governor's homes, and I wouldn't say they're aging in place ready 100%, but my understanding is they do have some features like that accessible bathroom in the home. But I think unfortunately most of those still are above grade and have steps to get in. And oh, I want to throw this out about steps. I know we got a little bit of time. Steps versus ramps. We really like our steps on housing, but we live in the Great White North where snow is common, and it's actually a lot easier to clean snow off a ramp than it is steps, yet we still keep utilizing steps in lieu of ramps. Susan, were you about to say something?
Well, no, that's fine. I just think that you can actually, if you have a builder that's struggling with both, you saw the example where you had the step and you had the ramp on the side. So you can make if they had issues, let's just do both. And then, because it can be, as far as aesthetically pleasing from curb appeal, it really actually solves a lot. The delivery people love the ramps, and moving in and out of a house is awesome.
Absolutely. So, and that's what ramps are actually very good design features, but we've got, we're so used to that big wood ramp that sticks off the edge of a house like 20, 30 feet, it feels like. And those are not popular, but there are ways to make very beautiful ramps.
Oh, yeah.
So another question, do ADUs, I assume you mean accessory dwelling units, mandate standards you've outlined? Again, excellent responses. Sorry as I can't talk since I'm multitasking at work. We're happy to have you. James, would you like to say anything about the accessory dwelling units and the standards?
Okay, so I know what, restate the question though. Would they be good to have following those standards, or what was the question now?
Well, the question is, do the accessory dwelling units mandate the standards, the visitability standards that we've outlined? And I think the answer is.
Well, they should.
They should.
I have seen a few, and I've done a little bit of research in some of those, and I actually had I was trying to remember, why was I looking at all that stuff? Because I had pulled a bunch of information up on those for some other project. I have no idea why now. I have so much stuff going on right now. I was like, why did I pull all that information up? And then there was somebody that was really promoting that, and there was a few that actually there was some state that all of them were, and there was another state that had them, and none of them were accessible. And I was like, why did you even have them? So I think it depends on the funding that they have, and then also the codes that particular state or county puts into place. Because if they are truly being monitored correctly, they should be. But again, it depends on what is basically being monitored and managed by that municipality, because everything is so driven by the code and by the regulations that are being followed in that state or city or county.
And accessory dwelling units are getting very popular here in Rapid City.
Okay.
So housing, we have a shortage of affordable housing, and one solution they're proposing is that accessory dwelling units. And accessory dwelling units, have the potential to be very flexible. It could be for our older loved one who needs a little bit more help but still wants their own private space. It could be great for our college age kid who's ready to have their own private space but really not quite ready to live independently. They're really great flexibility. So I would hope that, more of them would have it. I'm not certain that there are standards yet that have mandated that they have these features.
There will probably be standards that will go in place once, this is really terrible of me to say this, but having watched the industry so long, when something really strange happens, then they'll put standards in place. Because, it's like something will happen in the industry, and then they'll realize that they really need strong standards to guide the process. Because if there's nothing in place yet, and that's in your state for those, if there's no regulations, then they'll finally get something in place.
So someone asked the definition of an accessory dwelling unit, and Susan, you're probably gonna have to correct me if I miss some of it, but essentially it's kind of like having an apartment that is on a lot with another house. It could be detached or attached to the main housing unit that is on the plot of land. Susan, am I kind of getting it?
Yeah, usually it's almost always detached. It's not really, it may, and then depending on the regulations in your community as to the square footage, it can be because it's setting on your lot. And if it can be, depending on how big your acre your lot is and how big it can be. They also have sometimes used to be called granny flats. They have multiple names, but yeah. So if you Google granny flats, you might also find them. There are different names in different countries.
Yeah, but they're a pretty nice solution for that, for kind of having folks that, you know, quite need a little bit of support, but still would like to have their privacy.
Yeah.
And James, he told us good points, very true about standards. So we've still got a few more minutes. If there's any other questions that folks might have for Susan, I know I keep piping in. This is kind of my favorite subject. Susan, do you have any wait, we got one. Do you think the type of design clinical for modifications often hinders adoption? So basically that hospital type design, do you think that hinders adoption?
I think lots of times people think that, you know, the grab bars and some of those things can look very institutional. And so it makes it challenging for people, but having been involved in it so long, I don't think designs look that way anymore. Not if it's integrated and it's planned for. And so it's all in how it's integrated and created in an interior, and it doesn't have to look that way.
Well, and that's one of the big things. Granted, there's a lot of homes that need modification at this point in time,
yeah.
But if we could at least at minimum get a visitability type code established, and homes are built at least to be visitable. That's a hard word.
I know that word's awesome.
It could help reduce that medical looking design, because unfortunately when you have to retrofit is when you kind of get, not always, but you get that more hospital design.
Well, yeah, because people basically are throwing things in on top of existing, but it's like you've got to get your no-step entrance, you've got to get your bathroom on the first floor, and you don't have to have grab bars in, but the thing is, if we'd had the blocking in the walls, if you have to add grab bars, and then, you know, the whole free circulation in that, you know, open floor plans really accommodate nicely for that, but it's just like, then we get some narrow doorway that goes to a part of the house where you want your guests to go to, or you need to go to. And so like all of a sudden now I need to use the kitchen, but now I have a pantry door that's only 2 feet wide. Why does it have to be 2 feet wide? Why is it not 3? So yeah.
So it is just changing our thinking about housing, and
yeah, it's hard to break, it's hard to break traditional building construction. Yeah.
Well, and one of my pie in the sky, like really ambitious things is I would love for South Dakota and North Dakota to show the rest of the country how to fix housing, because we're not unique or alone in what's happening in housing. This is a countrywide problem.
Yes. Yeah.
And then Lemon Housing just comments, if there is anything I can do to help people in our area, I have access to all the programs. And actually, Lemon Housing, I will be in your community on Friday to present this presentation again. So I will be there. If you want to come talk to me in person, I'll be at that theater. I can't remember the name of the theater downtown, but I'll be there presenting at noon, the same presentation.
You need to get the real estate people and the housing people there.
I know, we do. Let's get them all to come.
Yeah.
We've got about 2 minutes left. We're really grateful that you all joined us today. My email address, I'm the one who's been corresponding with you. If you have any other additional questions or comments, feel free to send me an email and I will forward them to Susan.
Yeah.
I
thank
think
you everybody for taking time, to listen.
Thank you, everyone.